Great, Herbie. Thank you very much for joining me. We're back into our Travel Thursdays, and great to be chatting with Herbie from AfricaReps. Herbie's based in Melbourne. Herbie, I've known you for many years. It's been great knowing you, and thank you for joining us today. And
Pleasure,
can
pleasure.
you tell us a bit, tell me a bit about your journey? What first drew you into the world of African travel?
Well, being an ex-South African, having grown up in South Africa, I spent much of my life in game reserves because I've always really loved that. But the turning point in my career came when the company I was working for was looking for diversification, um, and they were an export company, and they were looking to generate income. So the opportunity arose to acquire a private game reserve called Sabi Sabi, and I was given the choice to say, do I want to stay in the company I was with, or move across to a new company and do the marketing for a private game reserve? Now, I'd never been involved in the travel industry before, had no idea, but the sound of working with a private game reserve sounded very appealing. And I put my hand up. I said, "Yep, this sounds like a good opportunity."
No, you
And
can't do
that's
much better
really
than Sabi Sabi as well. That's a fantastic start.
well, Sabi Sabi. This I'm going back like 45 years. Sabi Sabi wasn't then what it is today. Um, there were basically no animals. It was fenced off from the Kruger National Park. But then, to cut a very long story short, over the years, Sabi Sabi just grew and grew and grew, got better and better. And when the veterinary fence that separated it from the Kruger Park came down, that's when things really started to change. Animals were able to move freely. I then spent literally 20 years putting Sabi Sabi on the map, more than 100 international trips, um, going all the way through the old days of apartheid in South Africa into the new South Africa, and from its very humble beginnings as a bankrupt game reserve with very few animals, today it is one of the finest game reserves in the world. But I'm not here to talk about Sabi Sabi because, again, I've moved on significantly since then. Um, and then when I decided that I needed to move on, I started my own inbound tour operation. Um,
And that was still in
the,
South Africa, was it?
I was still in South Africa. We were focused on the top end of the market, predominantly bringing people from the United States into Africa. And then, again, a very long story. I won't get into the details. Had the opportunity to follow my grandchildren and move to Australia. And when I announced to the travel industry that I called it relocating to Australia, um, I got a phone call the next day to say, and the gentleman that contacted me, you probably know the name. His name's Colin Bell.
Very
Um,
well.
and
Yes.
Colin said to me, "I hear you're moving to Australia. We need some marketing. Do you think you could have a little bit of time for us to do some marketing for the companies I work for or own, being Wilderness and Great Plains, which was one company at the time?" And at that stage, I hadn't even thought about what I was going to be doing in Australia. And I said, absolutely. And that day, I registered AfricaReps and never looked back. So, Melbourne, basically, I'm dealing with Africa every single day. And in fact, I tell people that I've got to be the luckiest guy in the world because I have 2 days every single day. From 9 o'clock in the morning, I have my Australia day. And come 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening, I have my Africa day. So,
And so how do you choose which properties or experiences to represent with Africa Reps?
not difficult to explain that one. Maybe because I'm a snob and I like the good life, and no, but only kidding. My focus has always been the top end of the market, and uh, I always, when I look for new product, new clients, new partners, I always look for the smaller, more bespoke, more upmarket 4-star to 5-star. It's very hard to categorize game reserves or game lodges into star category,
Yeah.
but people understand the concept, so I use that. But when, for instance, I've just a few months ago, I just acquired a new representation for a camp called Lion Camp in the South Luangwa Valley of Zambia. And the reason I took that one on as opposed to many of the others in the area is because it ticked all the boxes in terms of its size, its exclusivity, its philosophy on how they handle the safaris, small, upmarket, exclusive, dedicated 5-star, and it just fitted my.
No, you've worked with quite a lot of incredible properties over the years. Is there one place that stands out for you personally?
Is a I get I get this question all the time. People say, "What's my favorite place in Africa?" There is no favorite place in Africa because everything is so so different. But if I think in terms of an experience that comes to mind, um, it takes me to an unbelievable camp called the Tembo Plains Camp in the Sapi Reserve, which is in Zimbabwe. It's downstream from Victoria Falls. It's on the Zambezi River. And when I was there, it was the year before last, I think it was. Um, and it was my first time there. And I don't want to sound blasé, but I've done a lot of game drives in my life. And sitting on a bumpy Land Rover isn't always the thing that I like the most. And being on the river, I just said to my safari guide, can we rather just spend time on the water rather than on an open vehicle? And he said, absolutely. So the evening safari, which started at about 4:30, 5 o'clock, the boat was waiting, and we went out on the boat. There was a herd of elephants crossing the river. We followed the herd of elephants across the river, and going from Zimbabwe to the Zambian side, across the Zambezi. And he said to me, Herbie, there's a boat moored over there. I'm sure those are illegal fishermen. Can we go and check it out? And I said, I'd rather not. I don't want to get into any trouble. He said, no, it's going to be safe. I promise you it's safe. Let's just go and make sure these guys are not illegal fishermen. And if they are, excuse me, we need to get rid of them. So with great trepidation, I said, well, okay, let's go there. And we went around a little island to where they were moored. And so help me, what was that boat? It was the Sundowners for me being prepared in the middle of the Zambezi River on a sandbank. They'd set up an entire bar with everything that I loved, including my whiskey and my amarula, the amarulas which I chose. And that put chairs and tables, and I sat there the sun was setting, a beautiful warm evening, my feet in the Zambezi River, drinking my amarula. That's a memory that will stay with me forever.
Now, you've seen Africa in a way few people have. I mean, you've seen it from all different angles. Is there a hidden gem you think other travelers should know about? I mean, that area, as you say, it's fair. I mean, I'm going to point up there. That's an oil painting from that very area, just upstream from Tembo Plains, one of my favorite areas in the whole world. But is there anywhere else, any other hidden gems you think more travelers should know about?
There's so many. Probably the two areas that come to mind that are totally diverse but equally appealing and exciting is the Masai Mara in Kenya, which is probably one of the most well-known destinations.
Yeah.
And I represent a number of camps under the Great Plains Conservation umbrella, all small, bespoke, upmarket camps spread across the Masai Mara, which are absolutely superb. So the Mara in itself, just because of its incredible open spaces, and of course the renowned Great Migration, that is just an amazing place. And then by complete diversity, the Sabi Sand Game Reserve on the border of the Kruger National Park. Completely different wildlife. I mean, an elephant is an elephant, so is a lion. You see the animals there, but the environment is so different that you can combine both those areas in one trip, basically, and have the diversity that you don't think that there's been any duplication whatsoever.
Have you seen any changes in travelers' expectations or their interests and so on when it comes to Africa over the years?
You know, there's a significant change that happened post-COVID. People were so locked. I'm talking about the Australians, but it's probably global. People were so tired of being locked up that they wanted to escape and just have freedom. But what's happening now is that instead of wanting to do many, many, many camps in one trip, we're finding that people need time. It's all about time and space. Time to relax, space to be away from the maddening crowds. So we're finding that more people just want to spend longer in a camp rather than spend short times in 5 or 6 camps, rather spend 4 nights in one camp than 2 nights in 2 camps. And that is a very, very appealing and interesting trend these days.
It's actually something that I do stress a lot to clients when they're talking about planning a trip, and I'm
Yeah.
saying travel less and experience more.
Correct.
It's a mantra I've been
Well,
repeating it
if
time and
I
time again. Any particular story that you'd like to share about an unexpected or a magical wildlife or a cultural or other sort of encounter that you've had?
a experience in Madagascar to a new camp that my ground operator there, Madagascar Classic Collection, had opened up a camp called Namaroka. And driving there on some tortuous roads, I was fascinated by the little villages all along the road. And when I was at the camp, I said to the manager there, is there any chance that we could spend a bit of time and go and visit one or two of those villages? And he said, yeah, no, absolutely. The villagers love that. They took me to a village which was maybe a half an hour's drive away. And we got out and we started walking, and immediately I was surrounded by these children. Now, bearing in mind that Madagascar is it's one of the poorest countries in the world. On the happiness rating, it's rated as one of the happiest countries in the world. Now, think about that anomaly: poor but happy.
Yeah.
And I walked through this little village. The children followed me. They were smiling. They wanted photographs to be taken. They didn't want the pictures. They just wanted to see themselves on the camera. And it was absolutely heartwarming just to be with these. And I mean, the warmth of the families, a mother that came out of her little hut holding a baby that was only 2 days old, absolutely extraordinary. Chickens and dogs and cats and God knows what else running around, mangoes hanging from the trees. It just was a very heartwarming experience just to be in a village with the people
Yeah.
and see the almost infinite distance between what my lifestyle is and what their lifestyle is.
It's funny, it's those experiences which you can't really describe, but once you're there, we had a similar one. I was in Uganda earlier this year, and we did so, and it was totally unexpected. We were walking through the village and the same sort of thing, and it's one of the things that really stood out in all of my guests afterwards. That again, very similar to
Yeah.
what you're saying now.
Well,
So, what advice would you give to someone going to Africa for the first time?
go with an open mind, not with expectations.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is important. People go to Africa and you ask people, why do you want to go to Africa? They want to see Africa's wildlife. Okay, so they go there, they've got a preconceived idea
Mm.
that they have to see the big five. Now, the big five is an old-fashioned hunting term, supposed to be the most dangerous animals in the world to hunt. And we're trying to get rid of that because it's no longer a big deal. A giraffe is not one of the big five, but it's probably one of the most iconic creatures to see in Africa. So,
Absolutely.
so my advice to people is don't go expecting to tick off the big five, because if you don't see the big five, you'll be disappointed. Go with the objective of seeing a variety of Africa's iconic wildlife that your game ranger, your guide will teach you is so important. And don't just try and hope that there's going to be an elephant or a lion or a rhino or a leopard around the next corner. Go with an open mind to enjoy what Africa has to offer.
I think that's so important. And I think also what you said there just now, your guide makes such a huge difference to your safari. A guide can make or break your whole
And
trip.
what's also very important is that if you go with an expectation and tell your guide that you want to see the big five in your 2 night, 3 day stay, it puts such pressure on the guide that he will probably lose the empathy of trying to show you what the bush is all about.
So, um, I thinking about this, how you personally stay connected to the magic of the bush, even, you're not there directly. But you go back quite a bit, don't you?
Well, first of all, historically, pre-COVID, I was back in Africa at least 3 times a year.
Nice.
Post-COVID, I've only been back a couple of times. Um, but I'm very fortunate that not only do I like to go back, but I have to go back. So yes, I keep in touch. I'm talking to Africa every single day. I've got one foot in Australia and one foot in Africa all the time.
Fantastic. And so what's next for you, Africa Reps? Anything exciting on the horizon? Is
Always looking for opportunities. There are a couple of gaps that I need to fill. When I was in South Africa recently for the two big trade shows there, I interviewed quite a few people in terms of possibly bringing on new representations. Again, I'm sort of at capacity. I don't want to take on too much, because if you have too much and you can't give everyone full attention. One in particular that I'm looking for is to have a small hotel or B&B in the winelands of Cape Town
oh,
in
nice.
the Frontier Valley. So I've got a couple of people there that might be interested, but again, these things take time, and again, I need to choose what fits into my existing portfolio.